Is Coke an important symbol of American culture? What exactly is Coca-Cola? According to official Coca-Cola records, in May 1886, John Pemberton of Georgia was preparing a headache remedy when he inadvertently mixed coca and cola nuts with cane sugar to create a caramel-colored liquid that he sent to a nearby pharmacy, added soda, and created what would become the world-famous Coca-Cola. In fact, the birth of Coca-Cola was much more complicated. In his biography of Coca-Cola, Mark Pendergrast mentions that John Pemberton was an addict who was originally a soldier in the American Civil War and used morphine to relieve his pain after being wounded in the Civil War. In the 19th century, the United States had a wide variety of prescriptions and potent drugs, and businessmen worked with pharmacists to add alcohol and drugs to prescriptions claiming to cure various diseases. Some of these formulas contained not only morphine, but also cocaine and marijuana. Coca-Cola is one of them. It is interesting to note that at almost the same time that Coca-Cola was born, Pemberton magically gave up morphine, most likely because of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was first called Coca-Cola, but was later changed to Coca-Cola for the sake of consistency, and Coca and Cola are derived from its two important ingredients, coca and cola nuts. Coca contains cocaine, and more than 2,000 years ago, the Incas in South America discovered that chewing a small group of coca leaves could achieve the effects of refreshment, appetite suppression, and libido enhancement. In the mid-18th century, a Bordeaux wine with coca leaves, Mariani, was popular throughout Europe and the United States. The Pope, the Queen of England, the President of the United States, the great inventor Thomas Edison and other celebrities and government leaders were loyal supporters of this wine. Pemberton added cola nuts to the Mariani and developed a cottage version, French coca wine. The coke fruit, which originated in Cana, West Africa, is similar to coca in that it is also used to refresh the mind, strengthen the body, and have an aphrodisiac effect because of the caffeine it contains. Some studies have shown that the combination of caffeine and cocaine can also enhance the effects of cocaine. However, not long after, the city of Atlanta, where Coca-Cola was located, passed a prohibition on alcohol that would be enforced 7 months later, and Pemberton had to modify the Coca-Cola formula, replacing the alcohol with sugar and soda. Rather than a drink, it is more accurately described as a bottle of addiction. In fact, modern scientific research shows that sugar is also an addictive substance. The bubble-rich soda provides a strong stimulus at the moment of entry, providing a very similar drinking experience to alcohol, making Coca-Cola the best alternative to alcoholic beverages during the Prohibition era. Coke lover and investment guru Warren Buffett has always been a fan of the addiction business, and his investments in Coca-Cola, Hershey's candy, and products such as Oreos, and Heinz of the Funkies all contain large amounts of addictive sugar. He has also commented on the tobacco business. Tell you what I like about the tobacco business? It's made for a penny, and it sells for $1. People who smoke are addicted, and there's a very strong brand loyalty. Both Coca-Cola with cocaine and Coca-Cola without cocaine and with less caffeine were great businesses in their own right, even with the free drink coupons. But Coca-Cola's early marketing was much more complicated than that. In the 1980s and 1990s, when Coca-Cola was born, there was also a golden age of advertising for prescription drugs and health products. He once said, "If I had $25,000, I would spend $24,000 on advertising for Coca-Cola and the remaining $1,000 on production." With limited funds, Coca-Cola's first year of advertising cost only $150, but the cost of advertising was very inexpensive at the time, with giant tarpaulin banners costing $1 each, tram banners costing a little over a penny, 3 posters costing a penny, and 1,000 drink tasting coupons printed for only $1. Leading the early marketing of Coca-Cola was Frank Robinson. If Pemberton was Coca-Cola's product manager, then Frank Robinson was Coca-Cola CMO, the marketing brand man who took the name Coca-Cola, wrote the Spencerian Coca-Cola logo, created the Coca-Cola products, planned the Coca-Cola advertising materials, and was responsible for the overall Coca-Cola. He was responsible for the overall marketing of Coca-Cola. Robinson's marketing strategy was simple and effective. he used various print advertisements to open the minds of as many people as possible to the Coca-Cola name. He worked with drugstores, cold stores, and other end-use channels to make Coca-Cola easily available to consumers, and he lowered the threshold of consumption by giving away free drinks and relying on the addictive nature of the product itself to create repeat purchases. The first advertisement for Coca-Cola was published in the Atlanta Journal on March 29, 1886, and, like many new products, it highlighted Coca-Cola's characteristics: Coca-Cola, delicious. Refreshing. 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 Coca-Cola is a combination of the wonderful coca leaf and the famous Coke fruit. Available at all cold beverage counters. The ad written by Robinson was not only very simple and eye-catching, but also saved the cost of buying space to place the ad. To get more exposure for Coca-Cola, Robinson also borrowed from prescription drugs and health products and devoted much of his advertising budget to posters, road signs, calendars, restaurant dishes, thermometers, alarm clocks, pencils, student bookmarks, and glass plates for the cooler, so that consumers would remember Coca-Cola while using it repeatedly. Later, Coca-Cola began to advertise Coca-Cola for sale, 5 cents a cup in drug stores, cold stores, on the street and on cars. On June 16, 1887, the logo was first advertised in a newspaper and has been used to this day, the same one we see on every bottle of Coca-Cola. However, the best results were achieved with the free drink coupons, which Pemberton first thought were a waste of money, but Robinson soon proved that consumers would become repeat customers after using the coupons because of Coca-Cola's addictive nature. As a result, Coca-Cola stepped up its efforts to distribute the coupons, even using the Atlanta Metro Directory to mail them to potential consumers or commission travel promoters to deliver them. Before Prohibition, people stocked up on alcohol, and after Prohibition, Coca-Cola, an improvement on Coca, became the best alternative to Coca, and sales continued to rise, reaching 25,000 glasses a month in the summer of 1887. Although the Prohibition movement was voted off within a few months, Coca-Cola had already gained a foothold. The Coca-Cola brand has become a street cred in the current parlance of online merchandising, with elements of the Coca-Cola brand on Atlanta's streets, trams, buildings, and newspapers. In 1888, Pemberton died of cancer after selling Coca-Cola to businessman Candler for the ultra-low price of $2,300. Candler settled Coca-Cola's property rights, formed the Coca-Cola Company, acquired a legal trademark, and eliminated cocaine from the formula. During this process, the positioning of Coca-Cola changed as well, as Robinson led the transition from a drug to a more widely accepted beverage with a broader future, due to consumer aversion to pharmaceuticals. Robinson adapted the advertising slogan to Coca-Cola, delicious and refreshing. But the process was incremental, and for a long time Coca-Cola emphasized the tasty and refreshing nature of the drink while also emphasizing the relieves mental and physical fatigue and treats headaches nature of the drug. It seems that from the very beginning, the mixture of medicine and beverage was the way most people initially perceived Coca-Cola, tasting like a drug at first but becoming more and more desirable as the number of drinks increased. With this unique product attribute, Coca-Cola entered more cities in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, enticing people to try it with free drinks and fueling its growth with advertising blasts. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Coca-Cola would take about 30 forms of advertising each year, distributing more than 1 million copies of their advertising materials. By 1912, this figure had climbed to more than $1 million. In 1913, Coca-Cola distributed more than 100 million advertising items, including thermometers, cardboard cutouts, metal billboards, 50,000 each, Japanese fans and calendars, 1 million each, cooler trays, 2 million, cardboard matchboxes, 10 million, notepads, 20 million, baseball cards, 25 million, and countless cardboard and metal signs. This year's advertising alone was enough to satisfy the needs of every man, woman, and child living in the continental United States since 1650. Coca-Cola permeated every aspect of American life. In 1917, Coca-Cola changed its advertising slogan to 3 million bottles of Coca-Cola sold daily, which began to attract consumer attention with a specific number, and 8 years later, to 6 million bottles of Coca-Cola sold daily. This shows the influence of Coca-Cola at that time. What supported the growth of Coca-Cola was not only the addictive formula, the advertising, but also the bottling model that was not a priority for Candler. When Coca-Cola was first introduced, only syrup was produced, and the syrup was sent directly to pharmacies and cold stores, where it was added to cups with soda and ice to make the finished Coca-Cola. When Coca-Cola entered a new city, they first reached an agreement with the local pharmacist and beverage store owner, and then shipped the Coca-Cola syrup and promotional materials such as banners and flyers with the Coca-Cola logo to the city. However, with the increase in sales, the environment in different cities is very different, and each business practice is completely different. Adding too much or too little soda will affect the taste, and the lack of ice or coolers will also affect the experience of the moment of entry. The bottle licensing system can solve this problem very well. Coca-Cola only needs to build a factory to produce the syrup and send it to the bottling plant, which can quickly produce a consistent tasting Coca-Cola by adding a quantity of soda water according to the corresponding operating rules. The change from non-standardized cups to standardized bottles was a landmark step in the development of Coca-Cola, and standardization meant reproducibility. In fact, not only the bottles, but also the caps, machines, and trucks are locally sourced and locally operated, and naturally the employees are also local. In fact, not only the bottles, but also the caps, machines, and trucks are locally sourced and locally operated, and the employees are naturally local. For Coca-Cola, the reduction in production means that the uncertainties, including material increases, are left to its partners, and Coca-Cola is able to focus on the most important and profitable aspect of syrup production, thus maintaining its high profit margins. In addition, the bottle itself became part of the Coca-Cola brand because of its unique curved design. A 1949 survey showed that more than 99% of Americans could recognize Coca-Cola by the shape of its packaging alone. The Coca-Cola Arc bottle was the equivalent of Coca-Cola. At this point, the Coca-Cola business model was basically formed. Large-scale advertising brought Coca-Cola as much exposure as possible to attract people to buy it. The mystery formula kept everyone who tasted Coca-Cola wanting more, and the bottle licensing system gave Coca-Cola the ability to be reproduced infinitely at a fraction of the cost, allowing Coca-Cola to take root in every corner of the world. This classic business model continues to operate today. In 1919, Candler's son sold the Coca-Cola formula, trademark, and brand equity to an investment consortium led by banker Ernest Woodruff for $25 million. The balance sheet showed that the total value of Coca-Cola property, buildings, machinery, and equipment was less than $2 million. Among the most legendary of Coca-Cola's brand assets is the mysterious formula that has been kept as Coca-Cola's top secret. Starting in 1925, Robert Woodruff, his son and the true creator of the Coca-Cola empire, stored the world's only copy of the formula in a safe at SunTrust Bank for 86 years until 2011. When it was transferred to a 3-meter-tall safe at the Coca-Cola World Headquarters Museum in Atlanta, GA, where visitors to the museum are first monitored by 16 high-definition cameras covering 360 degrees. Visitors to the museum are first monitored by 16 high-definition cameras covering 360 degrees, and all details such as height, gender, skin color, and clothing are recorded before they can approach the safe. To this day, there are only 3 people in the world who truly possess the mysterious formula, and their identities are absolutely confidential. Although Coca-Cola has worked hard to give the recipe a mystique, it is not difficult to make a carbonated drink that tastes like Coca-Cola. From the time Coca-Cola came out of Atlanta, Coca-Cola imitators have been able to produce Coca-Cola in different dosages, for different uses, and with different flavors. The Coca-Cola Company has used legal action and even threatening letters to limit counterfeiting, but to this day, Coke is still available in every market in the world where it is available, most notably the blue Pepsi Coke. In 1894, Caleb Bradham, a North Carolina pharmacist, invented a Coke drink containing pepsin and sold it as a tonic to alleviate indigestion symptoms. It was initially known only as Bradham's drink. In 1898, Bradham renamed it Pepsi-Cola and began to rub off on the Coca-Cola craze. However, the company went bankrupt twice in 30 years due to operational problems until the 1930s, when New York businessman Guth bought Pepsi-Cola. Guth, who had run a candy store and a soda store and had seen the tremendous influence of Coca-Cola, wanted to partner with Coca-Cola, but Coca-Cola refused Guth's offer to stock the product at a lower discount, and the angry Guth ordered all of his stores out of Coca-Cola and out of business forever. He then bought PepsiCo, which had gone bankrupt again, and took the lead in removing the pepsin ingredient and modifying the formula to mimic Coca-Cola as closely as possible. This was the beginning of a 100-year feud between Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. In the early days, Gus deliberately avoided the identity of Pepsi-Cola as a substitute for Coca-Cola. Lacking a clear identity, consumers were reluctant to pay for a bottle of Coke that was the same price and tasted similar but was not Coca-Cola. After being rejected by Coca-Cola again, Guth had the bright idea that the cost of selling 12 ounces was not much different from 6 ounces, and in 1934, Pepsi-Cola began selling large 12-ounce bottles of Coke in old beer bottles for 5 cents, and at the same time introduced the phrase "double the Coke for the same price." The slogan "double the Coke for the same price" was introduced, and the discounted price quickly became a nationwide hit, and Pepsi-Coke began to make a profit that year. Facing the fierce Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola took up the legal weapon and sued Pepsi-Cola for trademark infringement, and the lawsuit lasted for several years and was finally settled through out-of-court mediation in 1942. Coca-Cola lost its patent on Coke, and the word Coke could be used for any caffeinated, tan-colored carbonated soft drink, and Pepsi-Cola chose a red, white, and blue logo to distinguish Coca-Cola. How do you make a product known to consumers in the shortest possible time? Creating a buzz with the market leader in the field not only creates a buzz, attracts media attention and creates multiple communications, but also subtly creates a connection with the market leader in the minds of consumers. This was also the case with Red and Blue Coke, where the court battle gained media attention and the media influenced creators such as writers and comic book artists whose powerful creative abilities made a huge impact on Pepsi-Coke's modest advertising budget. PepsiCo's use of a patent-protected mechanical device to write PepsiCo stories in the sky inspired a cartoonist to create a comic strip called Coca-Cola's Flak Tries to Shoot Pepsi in the Air, which created a strong connection between PepsiCo and Coca-Cola. Two anti-traditional writers, Alan Kent and Austin Crum, wrote an upbeat song to the tune of "Do You Know John Pearson?" To the tune of "Do You Know John Pearson?" they wrote a light-hearted jingle, "Pepsi-Cola is good, Pepsi-Cola is good, Pepsi-Cola tastes good, 12 ounces is a lot. Pepsi-Cola is good. Pepsi-Cola is good." Pepsi-Cola made a 30-second radio commercial for the song, which was played on the radio to good effect and then turned into an orchestral record that actually sold 1 million copies. After that, the song was adapted into a march, a waltz, a rumba, and a country song, which was repeatedly spread and once received the appraisal of the disaster of the American continent, just like the Fairest of Fame, Little Apple, and Coyote Disco in the previous years. As the song became popular, Americans remembered Pepsi Coke and branded it with a 5-cent 12-ounce label. PepsiCo also tried to buy Popeye's patent, hoping to replace the Magic Spinach with the Magic Pepsi Cola. After the failure, PepsiCo created the comic strip Pepsi and Pete, which tells the story of two police officers who defeat evil by drinking Pepsi Cola. All of Pepsi Cola's advertisements were desperately trying to establish a connection with Coca-Cola, and this strategy proved so effective that by 1941, Pepsi Cola's market share had risen to 14%. However, Coca-Cola still dominated the soft drink market, with a 46% share. One media source commented, "Coke is the quintessential symbol of the American soul, a real, widespread and innovative companion for life." This is largely due to Coca-Cola's successful branding strategy in the early 20th century, especially during the Great Depression in the United States. In 1923, Robert Woodruff succeeded his father as president of Coca-Cola, and under his leadership, Coca-Cola grew to become one of the world's most recognized brands through the Great Depression, World War II and post-World War II globalization. Woodruff began his tenure with a difficult question: was Coca-Cola a healthy family beverage or a mild alternative to alcohol? More and more people were becoming concerned about the side effects of long-term Coca-Cola consumption, including damage to the brain and digestive function, and effects on mental health and fertility in women. Instead of taking a defensive and passive approach, Woodruff repositioned Coca-Cola. There was nothing earth-shattering about Coca-Cola, it was just a very small thing that made people's lives a little more relaxed and enjoyable. Coke's advertiser, Archie Lee, interpreted Woodruff's philosophy as "enjoy your thirst" while working or playing, and gradually iterated it into the famous phrase "the pause that refreshes." In the 1920s, as the economy recovered from World War I, the pace of work and life in the United States increased and stress levels rose. Many advertisers were willing to use scare tactics to create messages such as "not going to bed at 11 o'clock p.m. is chronic suicide" and "eating these foods is tantamount to." The advertisers are willing to use scare tactics to attract consumers' attention by triggering anxiety. The Coca-Cola ad, however, is a departure from the norm, using pictures of upbeat, contented, good-looking, young, successful people enjoying Coca-Cola beverages with the shortest possible text to convey the unique feeling that Coca-Cola is always in cool and happy places and always refreshing. It's a unique feeling. In this issue, Coca-Cola will create a nostalgic countryside advertisement, featuring a freckled boy holding a dog with a Coca-Cola, standing by an old fishing hole, and a vibrant country girl sucking Coca-Cola from a glass bottle with a straw, cleverly establishing a connection to the rural life that busy people yearn for. Coca-Cola also portrays various advertisements of office workers taking a break from drinking Coca-Cola, which is associated with taking a break. Coca-Cola also holds advertising contests, which have yielded a wide range of advertising materials that emphasize Coca-Cola's taste, purity, rejuvenation, delight, price, and thirsty enjoyment. Coke's carefully designed advertisements were placed on major transportation routes throughout the United States, on iconic buildings such as Times Square in New York, and in newspapers and magazines such as Women's Home Journal and the Saturday Evening Post. Gradually, people began to recognize that Coke is relaxing and enjoyable. As the United States entered the Great Depression in the 1930s, and as alcoholic beverages were finally legalized in 1933, people were able to drink their way through the hard times again. Who would drink soft drinks when they could legally get real beer and men's whiskey? It was clear that Coca-Cola was going down the drain. However, Coca-Cola continued its growth trend through effective marketing. First, Coca-Cola continued to deepen its happy brand image and created the popular Santa Claus image that still exists today. The cool, refreshing Coca-Cola is typically a cyclical product, usually selling well in the summer and dropping straight down in the winter. Coca-Cola also advertised, but to little avail. In 1931, Coca-Cola chose Santa Claus to help boost Coca-Cola sales. In their view, Christmas was a key marketing moment when the family would not only gather together but also share happiness with each other, fitting the happy brand symbol that Coca-Cola was trying to build. As a result, Coca-Cola contracted artist Hatton Sundblom to create a Coke-drinking Santa Claus. Although Christmas has a long history, the celebration of Christmas dates back to the early 17th century, when people decorated their homes with evergreen plants to celebrate the arrival of snow, gradually forming a Christmas tree culture. The main colors of Christmas were green and white, representing greenery and snow. The Santa Claus of that time was also a tall, thin, robed and skinned spirit. Shambaugh found inspiration in the famous poem The Night Before Christmas, which portrays Santa as a big, warm, caring, human figure. After the death of a salesman friend, Shambaugh used the mirror as a model for his own work, so there is more or less a trace of Shambaugh in the early Santa figures. At the strong request of Coca-Cola, Shambaugh changed the image of his green robe and used Coca-Cola's red and white logo colors to create a red coat for Santa Claus for the first time. The first image of Santa Claus was created in the Saturday Evening Post, a perpetually smiling old man in a red robe with a white beard, taking off his hat with one hand and holding up a glass of Coca-Cola with the other, reciting the famous advertising slogan, "The pause that refreshes, the pause that refreshes, enjoy a cool moment." Since then, Coca-Cola ads have appeared in Ladies' Home Journal, National Geographic, The New Yorker, and other magazines and newspapers, all of which have been very popular and have seen their sales increase several times over the Christmas season. More advertising exposure also made Santa Claus popular, and red replaced green as the main color of Christmas. The fact that Coca-Cola did not protect the Santa Claus IP back then has led to more brands, organizations, and individuals joining in the creation of Santa Claus peripherals, so that people now think of the ever-smiling, bearded, red Santa Claus when they mention Christmas. Second, Coca-Cola has captured the dividends of the rapid development of film and radio. Just as the 2020 epidemic hit the offline industry but became an important opportunity for online industries such as gaming, e-commerce, and online education, the Great Depression of the 1930s brought life to the U.S. movie industry. Coca-Cola, as an advertiser, was one of the beneficiaries of the film industry's growth. Coca-Cola sent special cinematographers to Hollywood to work with the film crew to design Coca-Cola placements, and hired special agents to distribute Coca-Cola on the movie sets, 2 cases a month for major stars and 5 cases a day for all the on-set production staff. Consumers saw that the stars were drinking Coca-Cola both inside and outside of the movie and subconsciously purchased it. In addition to advertising, they also sponsored string orchestra programs, captivating a generation of radio lovers. Third, Coca-Cola began to personalize its marketing to different user groups. For male users, Coca-Cola used sex appeal to attract the attention of male users by having more scantily clad Coca-Cola girls posing in various sexy poses while drinking Coca-Cola. For female customers, especially housewives, Coca-Cola introduced a family-friendly 6-pack of Coca-Cola, and sent female employees door-to-door to install Coca-Cola bottle openers and give out free redemption coupons for the newly packaged drinks. For the first time, Coca-Cola advertised food products with Coca-Cola, portraying Coca-Cola as the perfect partner for any food. In addition, Coca-Cola enlisted the help of Housewives Radio Club host Ada Ellen, who at one point suggested that any housewife who trusted her could use Coca-Cola as a beverage to accompany every meal. For children, Coca-Cola provided stationery such as cards, notepads, pencils and pencil sharpeners for school, as well as cardboard cutouts of miniature circuses, small towns, airports, and Olympic Games with Coca-Cola elements. Coca-Cola even gave out free redemption coupons to preschoolers to get them hooked on the taste of Coca-Cola at an early age. As mentioned above, Coca-Cola has become the quintessential symbol of the American soul, not just as a drink that brings joy, but as a part of American culture. This is what led to Coca-Cola's World War II legacy and its post-World War II globalization. Globalization was one of the goals of Ernest Woodruff's acquisition of Coca-Cola, and in the final words of a 1919 Coca-Cola press release, the new management will expand the business more extensively than before. Not only in the United States, but also in other countries. By 1922, Coca-Cola had invested about $3 million in bottling franchises throughout Europe and had also placed a significant number of coolers with elements of the Coca-Cola brand, but traditional Europeans seemed uncomfortable with the new, eye-catching, and flashy markings, and the cork used to seal Coca-Cola bottles reacted with the liquid, producing a toxic substance that caused the European business to become unstable. The cork used to seal Coca-Cola reacted with the liquid and produced toxic substances, causing a continued downturn in European business. It was then that Coca-Cola executives realized that Coca-Cola was a complete novelty in Europe and needed to expand in the same way as Atlanta did in 1885. However, the European expansion did not go well because of a lack of capital and Coca-Cola's failure to find a role as an alcoholic alternative during the Prohibition era. In addition, the different languages and cultures caused many problems. The generic advertising slogan "Coca-Cola restores your strength" meant "wash your hands with Coca-Cola" in the Netherlands, and the company had to redesign the slogan. Coca-Cola's expansion in other countries in the Americas was also unsuccessful. In Cuba, Coca-Cola rented a plane and wrote the Coca-Cola slogan "Tome Coca-Cola, drink Coca-Cola," with smoke in the air, but the wind blurred the words and people who saw it mistook it for Team Coca-Cola, Fear Coca-Cola. Fear of Coca-Cola. It is interesting to note that Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola's arch-rival, gained a great deal of attention in the early days with this approach and quickly grew to become a strong competitor to Coca-Cola. There was also a cultural problem in Cuba when a Coca-Cola ad showed a pit bull, but because pit bulls are banned in Cuba, the ad caused a lot of controversy. Overall, before World War II, Coca-Cola struggled outside of the United States until the outbreak of World War II, as opposed to its success in the United States. The Coca-Cola strategy was to connect with the United States. Most of the great companies met with the right time to achieve their greatness. Without World War II and the entry of the United States, Coca-Cola would not have become the blood of American soldiers, would not have become the global code word during the war, and would not have become globally popular after World War II. Shortly after the outbreak of Pearl Harbor, the United States began sending 16 million troops around the world. Woodruff, already a patriot, recognized a golden opportunity and issued a special order that would go down in history: no matter where the Chinese troops are, and no matter what the cost to our company, we will make sure that every soldier can buy a bottle of Coca-Cola for only 5 cents. Through lobbying, the U.S. military and Congress eventually decided to send Coca-Cola to the front lines as a military supply, along with chocolate, chewing gum, and cigarettes, and to waive the sugar quota, while its competitor, PepsiCo, had to buy sugar at high prices and even take the risk of smuggling sugar from Mexico. Due to the transportation problems of military supplies, the original way of exporting bottled Coca-Cola directly changed to the way of exporting concentrates and building local factories for canning, so Coca-Cola built bottling plants in the places where the U.S. Army was stationed and produced Coca-Cola on a large scale, and after World War II, the U.S. Army withdrew. These plants were retained and became the local production base of Coca-Cola. Not only that, but because of the influence of the U.S. military and the example of the American GIs, drinking Coca-Cola often gained local popularity, and the Coca-Cola produced by the local bottling plants was spread to local venues in a variety of ways, gradually becoming popular. In Iceland, for example, Coca-Cola, originally unknown to the public, gained the approval of the entire civilian population of Iceland due to the construction of the U.S. Air Force Base and the admiration of the Icelandic Prime Minister, and by the early 21st century, the annual per capita consumption of Coca-Cola in Iceland reached 446 bottles, more than any other country in the world, including the United States. During the war mobilization period, Robert Woodruff, president of Coca-Cola, issued a directive that the company will fight at all costs to make a bottle of Coca-Cola available to every soldier anywhere for 5 cents. Coca-Cola had long been a favorite among soldiers, who drank the non-intoxicating, refreshing beverage during drills. The company's strategy not only kept Coca-Cola sales up, but also made the connection between Coca-Cola and patriotism. In addition, soldiers on distant military bases did enjoy Coca-Cola, which helped them feel homesick and boosted their morale. In a letter to Coca-Cola, one officer said, "We sincerely hope that your company will continue to provide us with beverages in this time of national crisis." Another letter reads, "We believe that Coca-Cola is a great morale booster for our troops." The list goes on, and with the military's explicit support and the lobbying of politicians, Coca-Cola was granted the privilege of not being subject to sugar quotas in 1942 because its products were military supplies. In this way, Coca-Cola was able to continue to maintain production while its competitors had to cut production in half because of the quota. However, it would take half the world to ship bottles of Coca-Cola to military bases. This is very uneconomical, at least as it takes up too much valuable shipping capacity. So Coca-Cola set up a special bottling plant and soda factory closest to the base. In this way, the company was only responsible for delivering syrup to these plants. In the eyes of many military officers, the employees who kept Coca-Cola production running were as important as the soldiers who flew the planes and tanks. The Army gave them the honorary title of Technical Observer and the rank of Colonel Coke. Throughout the war, they built nearly 64 military bottling plants around the world, producing nearly 10 billion bottles of beverages. These technical observers designed a portable automatic beverage machine for use in the jungle and a miniature automatic beverage machine that could enter and exit the hatch of a submarine. At the same time, they promoted Coca-Cola to foreign civilians around U.S. military bases overseas. Later, many foreigners grew fond of the drink as well. Its market continued to expand and people from Polynesia to Zulu tasted Coca-Cola for the first time. Today, hundreds of letters are kept in the Coca-Cola archives. From these letters, we can see that in the hearts of American soldiers, Coca-Cola represented their country. One soldier wrote, "To me, suffering is for two equally important things: first, to enable the people of our country to enjoy the benefits of our country without fear or worry, and second, to be able to drink Coke as happily as ever." Another soldier wrote, "If someone asked us what we were fighting for, I think nearly half of us would say it was to be able to buy Coke again." Despite the fact that Coke was available in some distant war zones overseas, soldiers treasured it. They often saved it for special occasions or sold it to others at unbelievably high prices. In the Solomons, a bottle of Coke could sell for $5, in Casablanca $10, and in Alaska, $40. Robert Scott, a pilot in the Pacific, was awarded the honorary title of Ace Pilot, those who shot down more than 5 enemy planes, and a bottle of Coke after shooting down his 5th Japanese plane. He decided the bottle was too valuable to drink and gave it to a surgeon who had operated on him when he was seriously wounded. It was not only the soldiers and junior officers who enjoyed Coke in the Army, but many senior generals also praised it, such as Douglas MacArthur, Omar Bradley, George Patton, and other generals who enjoyed it. In June 1943, while inspecting the Allied war effort in North Africa, he sent a telegram detailing the need for 3 million bottles of Coca-Cola and a complete set of equipment capable of producing 60 million bottles of Coke per month. Before the equipment could be delivered, 10 individually working machines were to be sent to different locations, and these machines were required to produce 20,000 bottles per day. 6 months later, a number of Coca-Cola production lines were set up in North Africa. The following year, the Allies completed the famous Normandy landing during D-Day, and Coca-Cola entered Western Europe with the Allied forces. During the Rhine crossing, American troops even used Coca-Cola as a code word. In contrast, Coca-Cola had entered the German and Japanese markets well before the war and was well received, especially in Germany. Despite this, both Axis member states were critical of Coca-Cola, calling it the poster child for American sin. Avoiding the fact that Coca-Cola was hugely popular in their countries, Nazi advocates mocked that the only contribution Americans have made to world civilization is to invent chewing gum and Coca-Cola. Not coincidentally, their allies, the Japanese, declared, "To import Coca-Cola is to import the virus of American society." In 1945, the Allies won the final victory. Coca-Cola's military production lines were not immediately withdrawn. The lines continued to operate for 3 years during the subsequent post-war Reconstruction period, and their sales were directed to civilians. According to data, Coca-Cola built 64 bottling plants during World War II and sold more than 10 billion bottles of Coca-Cola. More meaningful than the volume of sales, Coca-Cola developed a stronger emotional connection with the American people through World War II. Why should companies invest so much money in their brands? The answer is surprisingly similar: to build trust and lower the threshold of consumer awareness. Brand building should be divided into 3 stages: awareness building stage, trust building stage, and emotional dependence stage. In the awareness building stage, the core solution is to go from being unknown to being known. The common method is to expose the core elements such as brand name, logo, slogan, and product style repeatedly, so that consumers gradually understand the existence of this product. The brand marketing, often referred to as open the mind, is this stage. Because it is from scratch, therefore, simple, direct and controversial advertising is often easy for people to quickly generate memories. In the trust building stage, many target consumer groups already have a certain awareness of the brand, therefore, on the one hand, need to continue to consolidate this awareness, continue to maintain advertising efforts. Social psychology research shows that humans will be familiar with their own special preference for things. The degree of liking will increase with the frequency of appearance. Social psychology, this phenomenon is called social psychology calls this phenomenon the exposure effect, also known as the law of familiarity. On the other hand, a spokesperson will be hired to build trust in the brand through the trust endorsement of the spokesperson. At the stage of emotional construction, brands need to reach a closer relationship with users, like friends, like relatives. Pure brand exposure and endorsement of trust is not how to achieve this goal, but also requires brand owners to communicate with their users at a deeper level, to build a relationship similar to that between friends and relatives. This stage certainly requires the right marketing strategy, large-scale advertising spending, and the blessing of historical opportunities. Coca-Cola's brand-building process in the U.S. market also fits into these three stages, with the birth of Coca-Cola in the late 19th century, mainly through the refreshing, and the wonderful coca leaves and the famous Coke fruit. And the wonderful coca leaves and the famous Coke fruit. To attract consumers' attention. At the beginning of the 20th century, Coca-Cola's massive advertising, personalized marketing, and the rebranding of the Santa Claus IP were designed to further raise awareness and build trust with consumers so that more and more people would buy Coca-Cola. The outbreak of World War II opened up Coca-Cola's second artery and created an emotional connection between Coca-Cola and the American people. The caffeine and soda in Coca-Cola could refresh the mind, and the sugar could not only quickly replenish energy, but also bring happiness to the drinker, and as a beverage, Coca-Cola had no side effects and could be drunk continuously from bottle to bottle. With no competition, drinking Coca-Cola soon became a common hobby within the U.S. military. One soldier wrote in a letter to his family, "If someone asked us what we were fighting for, I think nearly half of us would say we were fighting so we could buy Coke again." Another soldier wrote, "To me, suffering was for two equally important things: first, to allow the people of China to enjoy the benefits of their country without worry, and second, to be able to drink Coke as happily as we did before." Coke became a Christmas gift for the U.S. Army and a military decoration, and Robert Scott, a pilot who was awarded the honorary title of Ace Pilot for shooting down 5 Japanese warplanes, explained that his motivation for shooting down the first Japanese plane He explained that his motivation for shooting down the first Japanese plane was based on the idea of America, democracy, and Coca-Cola. He was awarded a bottle of Coca-Cola as a reward for receiving the title of Ace Pilot. However, he felt that this bottle of Coca-Cola was too precious to drink and gave it to a surgeon who had operated on him when he was seriously injured. A corporal named George Brennan wrote to his boss at Coca-Cola that his war experience had given him a new perspective on the drink. "In the life of an ordinary civilian, if you have enough Coca-Cola, you are sure that everything is very good, and it doesn't matter if you have a little more or a little less, that's all. But it's only when you experience a severe shortage of Coca-Cola, or when you even suffer the misfortune of being without it, that you truly understand what Coca-Cola means to us as Americans." Not only was Coca-Cola popular with soldiers and junior officers, but World War II generals such as Douglas MacArthur, Omar Bradley, and George Patton were also fans of Coca-Cola. In June 1943, while inspecting the Allied war effort in North Africa, he sent a telegram detailing the need for 3 million bottles of Coca-Cola and a complete set of equipment capable of producing 60 million bottles of Coca-Cola per month. Before the equipment could be delivered, 10 individually working machines were to be sent to different locations, which were required to produce 20,000 bottles a day. In addition, enough syrup to produce 6 million bottles of Coke and a corresponding number of bottle caps had to be delivered. 6 months later, several Coca-Cola production lines had been set up in North Africa. The following year, the Allies completed the famous Normandy landing during D-Day, and Coca-Cola entered Western Europe with the Allied forces. During the Rhine crossing, American troops even used Coca-Cola as a code word. The emotional connection between Coca-Cola and World War II generals lasted well beyond World War II. At the end of World War II, the generals became not only heroes but pillars of America, and there is evidence that it was with the support and planning of Coca-Cola that Eisenhower was elected President of the United States, and later became a top Coca-Cola spokesperson. Once, Woodruff saw a photo of Eisenhower drinking Coca-Cola through a straw and angrily scolded him because only women drank Coca-Cola through straws at the time. while men blew into the bottle. Eisenhower defended himself by saying, "If I blow into the bottle, I'll be done in seconds. But if I use a straw, I can walk a lot more, talk a lot more, so that photographers and journalists can capture more shots of me drinking Coca-Cola." In fact, Eisenhower's relationship with Coca-Cola goes beyond that, as all the bottling plants in South America are owned by Eisenhower and his son. The influence of Coca-Cola in the World War II Army was also transmitted to the rear in various ways. In their letters to and from the Army, Coca-Cola was a word that appeared with great frequency, representing the desire to win, the longing for home and family, and the fact that every returning veteran carried Coca-Cola as a symbol of victory. In a 1948 poll of veterans conducted by the American Legion magazine, 63.67% of them ranked Coca-Cola as their soft drink of choice. Coca-Cola has also worked hard to amplify this emotional connection through a variety of advertisements, associating Coca-Cola with victory and joy. Coca-Cola's unpublished history shows that World War II led the company to befriend 11 million American soldiers and turn them into Coca-Cola customers. In addition, the company conducted overseas sampling experiments and market expansion efforts. Without this program, it would have taken 25 years and millions of dollars of investment. In 1948, the third year after the end of World War II, Coca-Cola's total sales profit reached $1.26 billion, while PepsiCo's was only $25 million. The difference was even more obvious when compared to the net profit after tax, which was $35.6 million for Coca-Cola and a miserable $3.2 million for PepsiCo. After the end of World War II, the world entered a bipolar pattern of US-Soviet rivalry. Because of the close relationship between Coca-Cola and the United States, Coke also became part of the game between the two dominant powers, with red Coca-Cola coming together with the blue-flagged United States and blue Pepsi-Coke coming together with the red-flagged Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was also the first to accept Coca-Cola, still thanks to Eisenhower. After World War II, during the negotiations between the United States and the Soviet Union to divide Germany, Eisenhower introduced the Soviet Union to Coca-Cola and Zhukov fell in love with the drink. At his request, and with the permission of President Truman, Coca-Cola produced a batch of colorless Coke with a white lid and a Soviet red star on the label. In fact, not only Eisenhower and Truman, but also Coca-Cola has maintained a good relationship with U.S. presidents, with Kennedy, Carter, and Clinton all saying they were Coca-Cola fans and often drank Coca-Cola in front of the camera. Of course, this close relationship is the result of a deliberate effort by Coca-Cola, not only by the aforementioned Eisenhower, but also by Jimmy Carter, who was once a foe of Coca-Cola but eventually helped to market the company worldwide. When Carter ran for governor, Coca-Cola supported his rival, and Carter publicly vowed to punish Coca-Cola, but as Carter won the election, Coca-Cola began to turn its back on Carter, and during Carter's presidential campaign, Coca-Cola's media advisors helped him create a new campaign image, reversing his low public approval ratings, and when Carter became president, he immediately expelled PepsiCo from the White House. When Carter became president, he immediately expelled Pepsi from the White House and replaced it with Coca-Cola, and at the same time, he invited many of Coca-Cola's employees to serve in key government positions. With President Carter's help, Coca-Cola also obtained licenses for Portugal, Egypt, Yemen, Sudan, and even Cuba. In the 1940s, Coca-Cola accelerated its efforts to expand into overseas markets. By 1950, one-third of the company's profits came from overseas. The United States, the world's most powerful capitalist nation, was constantly battling socialist forces around the world. At the same time, U.S. international influence was expanding. During the same period, the U.S. government adopted the Marshallese Program of Assistance to the Reconstruction of Europe. Coca-Cola was the perfect outlet for those who opposed American expansion and saw the Marshall Plan as an act of imperialism. Some French people referred to Coca-Cola's overseas sales as the Coca-Cola colonial movement. They launched a huge campaign against Coca-Cola's opening of a new canning plant in France. They believed that Coca-Cola would harm the development of the domestic wine and mineral water industry. They even tried to make Coca-Cola a toxic product and banned it by law. This made the Americans uncomfortable and they called the French ungrateful. Some newspaper editorials in the United States called on the government to stop funding the French part of the Marshall Plan. In response to French claims that Coca-Cola was toxic, company officials asked, did Coca-Cola have a negative impact on the health of the American soldiers who liberated France? French newspapers reacted similarly, with Le Monde warning that the morality of the French has degenerated to a precarious level. French protesters overturned trucks carrying Coca-Cola and smashed bottles. However, they did not have much impact on the sale of Coca-Cola, but rather, they not only gave Coca-Cola a lot of free advertising, but also gave Coca-Cola the color of a foreign drink and an illegal substance. Similar campaigns have taken place in other countries. Some radicals argue that Coca-Cola is harmful to health and that the spread of Coca-Cola will contaminate European civilization with American cultural values. The main supporters of these movements are usually alcoholics, mineral water bottlers, and soft drink producers. They were delighted to see activists working hard on their anti-Coca-Cola campaigns. Austrian radicals claimed that a Coca-Cola factory in their country could be turned into an atomic bomb factory in a heartbeat. Italian radicals claimed that Coca-Cola had turned the children of their country grey overnight. The Coca-Cola company did not respond to this, but kept their heads in the sand, working hard, and opening up overseas markets. They were convinced that the rumors would be dispelled once customers tasted Coca-Cola for themselves. Later, there were even more ridiculous attacks on Coca-Cola, with rumors that drinking Coca-Cola would make people sexually impotent and even cause cancer or sterility, but these rumors faded as Coca-Cola became more popular. In 1959, during a visit to Moscow, Vice President Richard Nixon attacked Soviet Communist Party General Secretary Khrushchev at a trade fair dedicated to American products. In 1965, Coca-Cola's intention to build a factory in the Soviet Union, a country with a large market, was immediately thwarted. The Soviet Union, as a socialist country, did not allow private enterprise. If Coca-Cola built a factory in the Soviet Union, it would have to take the Soviet government as a shareholder, and the company's profits would then flow into the Soviet government's pockets. In addition, as the war in Vietnam escalated, critics in the United States suggested that Coca-Cola's building a plant in the Soviet Union would be tantamount to financing the enemy. In view of these problems, Coca-Cola soon dismissed the idea. In 1962, Nixon became PepsiCo's legal advisor after his unsuccessful bid for governor of California, and became PepsiCo's spokesman abroad. In 1965, PepsiCo invested in a factory in Romania and, with Nixon's help, sold its products to the Soviet Union. In 1980, Coca-Cola reached an agreement with the Soviet Union to use Coca-Cola as the official soft drink at the upcoming Olympic Games in Moscow. However, just as Coca-Cola was about to enter the Soviet market, it was once again shut out of the Soviet Union when President Jimmy Carter announced that the U.S. would refuse to participate in the upcoming Olympic Games as a protest against the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. 1989 saw the toppling of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. One person who witnessed this moment later recalled, "We greeted our compatriots from the other side of the wall with bananas, Coca-Cola, flowers, and other things that represented the supremacy of Western users." East Germans lined up in front of the Coca-Cola factory in West Germany, waiting to buy their drinks by the case directly from the factory. Among the items that East Germans were eager to buy were hi-fi products, television sets, refrigerators, and, of course, cases of Coca-Cola. Because of Coca-Cola's close association with American values, there was one place in the world, other than the socialist countries of the Cold War, where Coca-Cola was not well received, the Middle East, where in 1966 an Israeli businessman accused Coca-Cola of withdrawing from the Israeli soft drink market in order to preserve the larger Arab market. The region was undoubtedly an ideal market for Coca-Cola because of the hot climate and the ban on alcohol consumption in Arab countries. Coca-Cola's annual profits in the region amounted to $20 million. In response to the Israeli allegations, Coca-Cola explained that in 1949 they had intended to invest in Israel, but the Israeli government interfered. In addition, the Israeli market was too small and the company was worried that the investment would not pay for itself. Some critics pointed out that these explanations were excuses, since Cyprus, an island in the eastern Mediterranean, is much smaller than Israel, yet Coca-Cola built a plant there. This anti-Semitic tendency of Coca-Cola began to be denounced with great vigor. Several Jewish organizations in the United States, including Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan and the famous Nathan's Hot Dog Mall on Coney Island, boycotted Coca-Cola. Under pressure, the Coca-Cola Company announced that it would grant the city of Tel Aviv, Israel, the right to manufacture and operate Coca-Cola. However, this move upset the League of Arab States, LAS, which called on its member states to boycott Coca-Cola. This time, Coca-Cola did not budge. So in August 1968, the League began a formal boycott of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola's decision was a pragmatic one, because if the Arab market had not been abandoned, the damage would have been even greater if all the Jews in the country had risen to boycott Coca-Cola. Once again, Coca-Cola's choice was in line with U.S. foreign policy. Taking advantage of this opportunity, PepsiCo withdrew from Israel and entered the Arab market instead. The move cost Pepsi some domestic customers because it was considered anti-Semitic by Jews. It was not until the late 1980s that the Arab boycott finally ended and Coca-Cola was able to re-enter the Arab market, particularly Egypt, Lebanon, and Jordan. In 1991, when the Gulf War broke out, Coca-Cola delivered Coke by refrigerated truck to the U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, but they couldn't compete with PepsiCo, which had 5 factories in the country. Television viewers around the world watched General Norman Schwarzkopf, the commander-in-chief of the U.S. coalition that drove Iraqi forces out of Kuwait, sign a ceasefire agreement with a can of Pepsi Coke by his side. In response, Coca-Cola switched to a strategy of increasing its competition in the Saudi Arabian market, leaving PepsiCo too busy to compete with it in other markets. When the war in Iraq broke out in 2003, anti-Semitic expression through attacks on soft drinks took on many forms. Muslim youth in Thailand poured out Coca-Cola in protest of the U.S. war of aggression. In areas where the anti-American movement was high, Coca-Cola sales were almost nil. At the same time, locally produced Coke became prevalent in the Middle East. In Iran, an Islamic Coke emerged that was extremely popular in Iraq, Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. The company that produces this Coke, called Zamzam, was previously a partner of PepsiCo in Iran. In its first week on the market, it sold 4 million cans in those regions. The West Bank company's Star Coke has been well received in the United Arab Emirates. In April 2003, when U.S. troops stormed Baghdad and captured Saddam's residence, they held a barbecue dinner where people ate burgers and hot dogs and drank Coca-Cola, of course. Coca-Cola introduced the world not only to the United States, but also to a business model that unified the global marketplace, namely, the globalization of trade. There are 2 different voices in the world regarding globalization. Proponents advocate that the elimination of tariffs and the breaking down of all trade barriers and other obstacles to free trade is the best way for countries around the world, whether advanced and developed or backward and poor, to get richer faster. For example, the developed countries to set up factories in developing countries is a matter of mutual benefit. Developed countries can reduce the cost of products, while developing countries can increase employment opportunities, thereby promoting economic development. Opponents denounce this behavior as a kind of naked exploitation, because they usually let the people of developing countries do some low-paying and low-status jobs. In addition, by moving jobs abroad, multinational companies can hire a cheaper labor force and obtain a more lenient regulatory environment. Such controversies continue to be heard today, and the complaint is often made that globalization is just a new form of imperialism as some multinationals spread their tentacles around the world and compete on a global scale. Some anti-globalization radicals believe that the United States, the world's only superpower, is preparing to fight a war of world conquest without a single soldier or shot, with cultural penetration, market expansion, and brand warfare represented by Microsoft, McDonald's and Coca-Cola. Positioning author Al Ries wrote a book titled Public Relations First, Advertising Second, suggesting that in the process of marketing, public relations should be used first to build the brand, and then advertising should be used to alert consumers. Coke's global marketing process is in line with this theory, with public relations first, leveraging its strong U.S. presence to first crack the local market through senior management, and then using large-scale advertising to get consumers to buy repeatedly. Because of this strategy, Coca-Cola lost the market in the Soviet Union, but PepsiCo took advantage of the situation and obtained franchises in Romania and the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the Soviet camp declined and the US began to spread its influence into these regions. Everyone from local officials to civilians saw Coca-Cola as a symbol of a new life that would bring jobs and a colorful life to the people. Coca-Cola was also present at historical moments such as the fall of the Berlin Wall. In the post-World War II era, globalization was actually Americanization, and only by succeeding in the US market could it become a truly global product. The US market is the main battleground. After the end of World War II, production in the United States began to recover and young people began to form families and have children. Children and young adults have traditionally been the main consumers of carbonated beverages and were the focus of the battle between Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. During this period, Coca-Cola, the leader, was mainly defensive, trying to define the category and take advantage of the rise of TV media to reach all user groups. PepsiCo, the laggard, took an extremely aggressive approach, defining the baby boomer generation and finding a way to survive from under the Coca-Cola umbrella, a strategy that continues to this day. PepsiCo's transformation began in 1950 when Steele, who had jumped from Coca-Cola to PepsiCo, became president. Previously, because Pepsi-Cola had been using a strategy of high volume and low CP value, and because of its stronger sweetness, it was often labeled as a poor person's product. In some areas of the United States, white people call Pepsi Coke nigger Coke, so some Americans, in order to avoid the poor label, will choose to pour Pepsi Coke into a glass, pretending to be Coca-Cola to drink. Steele first reduced the sugar content on the product side to make it taste similar to Coca-Cola. On the marketing side, Pepsi Coke tried to label it as a weight loss drink, and they repeatedly broadcast on live TV that Pepsi Coke is with the weight-conscious modern man. The reason is that if you drink Pepsi-Cola, you will still look good even if you don't eat anything else, and you can reduce your calorie intake. Pepsi also redesigned the bottle into a swirling pattern, and they invited the new American diva of elegance, Emerson, to host a 15-minute Pepsi show in a deep V-neckline dress, leaning over a chilled Pepsi bottle, which attracted many slim socialites to drink the drink. Pepsi-Cola even ventured into Coca-Cola's monopoly territory. PepsiCo once spent $30,000 to install Pepsi vending machines at 600 Fox Corporation, Fox, theater exits on the West Coast. The aggressive Pepsi-Cola strategy proved effective, as Coca-Cola's worldwide lead dropped from 5-1 to 3-1 in less than 5 years, while Pepsi-Cola's domestic market share rose from 21% to 35%, and even in Atlanta, where everyone loved Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola sales grew by 30% in 1 year. By the 1960s, Pepsi-Cola had found the secret to the brand's success. Understanding this backlash begins with Coca-Cola's continued dominance. Since World War II, Coca-Cola has held on to its base like a grand master, with almost no breakdowns. This is due to a simple and clear business model. In the words of Stella Kuo, CEO of Coca-Cola in the 1980s, Coca-Cola only needed to do 3 things: buy it, afford it, and enjoy it. Buyable means building various sales channels, supermarkets, convenience stores, sports arenas, factories, offices, and vending machines. Affordability means price. Coca-Cola's price has always been stable, and later it was introduced in various sizes for different occasions. Enjoyment is not only about the taste of Coca-Cola, but also about the emotional aspects of the Coca-Cola brand, such as joy, happiness, excitement, good times and patriotism, that make consumers accept it further. Coca-Cola only needs to do 3 things well: buy it, afford it, and enjoy it. This simple business model has also allowed Coca-Cola to make enough profit to support its trial-and-error advertising, and since its inception, Coca-Cola has capitalized on the dividends of almost every media revolution, from the aforementioned movies and radio to the rise of television and the ongoing wave of the internet and mobile networks. In the 1950s, Pepsi-Cola made a rapid comeback under Steele's leadership. Coke also capitalized on the rise of the television medium, which changed American leisure habits by bringing people indoors from outdoors to gather in groups in front of the TV rather than in public places. Coke also began to sponsor various programs created by television stations, and they also started a deep partnership with Disney, sponsoring the establishment of the Mickey Mouse Club in addition to various Disney programs. To reach as many Americans as possible, Coca-Cola also hired Eddie Fisher, the most popular male singer in the United States in the 1950s, as a spokesperson, the equivalent of Michael Jackson of that era, who had 19 solo singles in the top 10 of the US pop charts between 1950 and 1956 alone. Under the auspices of Coca-Cola, Fisher released a solo album entitled The Coca-Cola Era, praising Coca-Cola as a leader in the soft drink industry. His picture was also made into a life-size cardboard poster and put on a Coca-Cola skirt-shaped bottle to entice consumers to buy Coca-Cola. By the 1960s, McCann created the famous slogan for Coca-Cola, "With Coca-Cola, you'll get what you want." This was reinforced by an integrated marketing approach, with exposure on TV, radio, offline ads, print ads, carpet marketing, and various promotions. They have also reworded the ode to joy, "With Coca-Cola, the food tastes better, the fun is more enjoyable, the heart wants what it wants, and everything is as it should be," making the tagline fashionable enough to appeal to young adults without alienating consumers of other ages by being out of date. These tactics also gave Coca-Cola sales a dominant position throughout the 1960s. However, PepsiCo found a way to take the lead. In the 1960s, President John F. Kennedy introduced the concept of a new generation in his inaugural address, referring to the baby boomers born after World War II. PepsiCo realized that even though it was reaching all Americans, it was not enough to convert the Coca-Cola faithful to PepsiCo, so it focused its limited resources on the new generation. In the same way, if resources are limited, then focusing on the user base can often yield fantastic results. Pepsi-Cola is exactly this, even if Coca-Cola advertising as close as possible to the new generation, but because of its leading position, but still have to take care of more people, which has with Coca-Cola, you will do everything as you wish, emphasizing the product itself. Pepsi can be more aggressive in positioning itself as the young man's Coke, and by showing the young man's lifestyle, it will resonate with the young people. At the new TV broadcast, the short, quiet intervals were broken by the violent sound of a motorcycle turning or a roller coaster reaching its peak. After the brass trumpets, Joan Summers' voice builds up, calling consumers to move it. Let's do it. You are the Pepsi generation. The new Pepsi-Cola used innovative technology, handheld cameras, real-life Californian children instead of actors, and for the first time, helicopters to carry Pepsi-Cola vending machines into the sky, and the new campaign was finally effective in getting Pepsi-Cola to the hearts and minds of children born in the 1950s and children born in the 1950s. The new ad finally and effectively brought PepsiCo to the attention of children born in the 1950s and the new generation mentioned in Kennedy's inaugural address. Since then, the two major Coke brands have developed their own marketing styles, with Coca-Cola focusing on the product and highlighting the Coca-Cola product itself, and Pepsi-Cola focusing on the consumer segment, especially the young. In the 1970s, PepsiCo inadvertently found a more effective way to capture Coca-Cola's market share. 100 people have 100 Hamlets, and judging whether a drink is good or not is a difficult task for the average person, so if there is a Cole who presents as much detail as possible and gives a clear conclusion as to whether it is recommended or not, it will undoubtedly lower the threshold for consumers to make a choice. More than 40 years ago, Pepsi-Cola discovered that this model worked wonders. Pepsi-Cola discovered by chance that Pepsi-Cola was outperforming Coca-Cola in Coke taste tests, so in 1975, Dallas television stations began broadcasting the Take the Pepsi-Cola Challenge. In 1975, Dallas television began broadcasting the Take the Pepsi Challenge, a program in which consumers were tested anonymously to determine which drink they preferred, thus proving which drink was more popular. By the late 1970s, PepsiCo's market share had steadily increased, and in the summer of 1978, Nielsen market research showed that PepsiCo had surpassed Coca-Cola in supermarket sales. The Big Macs became fearful and began to suspect that Coca-Cola's formula was really no match for Pepsi-Cola's, which led to the $10 billion lesson we mentioned at the beginning, a dramatic formula change. What exactly is a brand? Is it the name that comes to mind, the logo that is repeatedly designed, the slogan that keeps changing, the characteristics of the product, or is it the so-called brand culture, the core of the brand? This is a question that haunts all business owners and marketers. I would like to discuss this topic from another dimension: what do people need? The first thing, of course, is the objective existence of things: hungry to eat, thirsty to drink water, cold to wear clothes, but also to have a place to live. Not only people, all the animals on Earth also need these things. But the reason why humans are called superior animals is that they have an ability that ordinary animals do not have, which the book A Brief History of Man attributes to the ability to make up stories. The human brain gives humans this ability. In the same way that other animals can only express information accurately in words, look out. There is a lion, while human language can convey information about things that do not exist. For example, the same lion, humans can say, the lion is the patron saint of our tribe. It is this ability to make up stories that has allowed humans to compile a variety of virtual stories, such as the stories of Pangu opening up the sky and creating the earth, the creation of the swain, and the story of the Yellow Emperor. Because of these stories, a large number of people who did not know each other established relationships, and over time, many of these virtual stories have replaced the things themselves and have become the consensus of the group. Thus, from the perspective of A Brief History of Man, Homo sapiens has been living in a dual reality since the beginning of its ability to tell virtual stories. On the one hand, we have objective realities like rivers, trees, and lions, and on the other hand, we have imaginary realities like gods, nations, and corporations. As time passes, the imaginary reality becomes stronger and stronger. Nowadays, rivers, trees and lions sometimes have to rely on the imaginary reality of gods, nations, and corporations to do them a favor and let them go if they want to survive. It can be said that objective reality and fictional content form a DNA double helix structure in the evolution of human society. On the one hand, the development of objective reality enriches human imagination and promotes human beings to create richer content. On the other hand, the content will bring together people with the same preferences, forming a close organizational structure, colliding and rubbing against each other to further improve objective reality. From this perspective, a brand is also composed of two parts: objective reality and fictional content. The product itself, the brand name, the brand logo, and the brand color are the objective reality, while the brand story created by the brand owner or consumers during the brand evolution process forms the brand's fictional content. Over time, the objective reality of the brand and the fictional content are fused together and inseparable. Coke is the best example of this, as its name and logo were established at its birth in the late 19th century, and its formula has remained unchanged since it was fine-tuned in the early 20th century, and has continued to enrich the fictional content associated with Coca-Cola, from the original refreshment drink, an alcoholic alternative, to the symbol of happiness during the Great Depression to the American symbol during World War II, interspersed with Christmas. These fictional contents have been blended with the objective reality of Coca-Cola, and over time, they have become a consensus among Coca-Cola consumers that this is Coca-Cola, a magical beverage that brings harmony and love, laughter, and joy. It is a magical beverage that brings harmony, love, laughter, and joy. If Coca-Cola did not make a big deal about it, but quietly changed its formula and gradually gained recognition, perhaps the formula change strategy would have been successful. However, making a dramatic change in the formula was, in fact, a very bad way to undermine that consensus. The decision to change the formula was endorsed by Coca-Cola's greatest CEO, Woodruff, who later proved to be an excellent leader in making Coca-Cola consumers in more regions of the world. But they ignored the group consensus behind the Coca-Cola product. From an objective factual standpoint, the new Coke tastes better, and the Pepsi Coke tests prove it. But from the perspective of group consensus, changing the taste is tearing down the consensus, tearing apart the group that was originally united, and rebuilding the consensus will take a longer time, requiring a virtual story beyond the product. This is something that Coca-Cola, with its 100-year history, cannot afford. Therefore, the only solution was to change back to the original taste and restore consensus. In fact, that's what Coca-Cola did later, restoring the formula and continuing to sell Coca-Cola, which didn't taste as good as PepsiCo. This is the power of a brand, which originates from a product, but is interpreted by people to transcend the product and become a belief of a group of people. The next story of Coca-Cola is basically the same as the previous one. The product remains the same, the brand remains the same, the business model remains the same, but what has changed is the different marketing methods for different user groups and different media formats to make the new generation accept Coca-Cola, identify with Coca-Cola and reach a consensus with Coca-Cola. After more than 100 years of development, Coca-Cola has become the most influential beverage group in the world and the #1 target for other players. 99% of people think that Coca-Cola's competition is Pepsi-Cola, but in fact it is the world's thirst-quenching beverage that it really needs to face. After years of experience in the market, Coca-Cola has concentrated its business philosophy on the 3A strategy: available, affordable, and acceptable, the sales strategy of localizing talents, the social welfare strategy of communicating with consumers through public service activities, and the cleverly conceived advertising strategy. In developing countries, where the economy is growing, there is still a certain demand for carbonated beverages and other sweetened beverages, and Coca-Cola can still adopt a carbonated-based sales approach. However, in developed countries, consumers are very concerned about sugar content, and the trend away from carbonation and sugar is gradually emerging. Coca-Cola is undoubtedly the most representative of globalization. Its rivalry with Pepsi-Cola is taking place in every corner of the globe, and Coca-Cola has established companies in more than 200 regions around the world, far exceeding the number of countries that are members of the United Nations. Coca-Cola has become the most widely known product in the world, and it is said that only fewer people know the word Coca-Cola than OK. The Coca-Cola Company is so famous and popular that no other company can compare with it. In Businessweek's annual announcement of the world's most valuable trademarks, Coca-Cola has always been in the lead. But if people don't want a product, no amount of brand name will convince them to pay for it. In 1985, Coca-Cola introduced the new Coke, a sweet Coke that was closer to Pepsi Coke. This time, the branding effect didn't work, and since its launch, this kind of Coke was rarely asked for, causing Coca-Cola sales to plummet. The company eventually had to reintroduce the earlier Coke, now called Retro Coca-Cola, within a few weeks to regain the market. In this way, Coca-Cola's efforts to change its image as the symbol of the new America ended in failure. A 1997 analysis in The Economist magazine found that Coca-Cola consumption was not only indicative of a country's level of globalization, but also of its national power, its people's standard of living, as measured by U.S. standards, and its level of personal and political freedom. The analysis concludes that a beverage with a world market, combined with its capitalist nature, is indeed extremely beneficial for the country and its people. Of course, we cannot say that Coca-Cola has made the world richer, happier, and freer, but it has always followed in the footsteps of customer supremacy and democracy throughout the world. Coca-Cola is the beverage of the 21st century, a testament to the rise of America, the rise of capitalism, and the growth of globalization. Whatever your attitude towards the drink, one thing you can't deny is that it has an irresistible appeal to the entire world. As one of the most famous beverages in history, there is no way to trace the roots of Coca-Cola to the myth it created. It seems that Coca-Cola is trying to give a new meaning to myth under the pressure of emerging competitors and changing business models. On the other hand, the rise of Coca-Cola and the changes in its business model have made it a myth.